Influencer culture has given children, it's given people hope. They see people like them from their town, from their walks of life, their age, their race, online, and they're inspired to achieve what their role models have. Thank you very much, Madam President. Good evening, members and honours guests. It's an absolute honour to have the opportunity to speak in this debate, which the President has given me. And well, look, I suppose that as a micro-influencer herself, who's appeared not only in the Charwell Beanock list, but also on the BBC, in the Times, and in such widely read articles as Disha Hegde auto-resigned as union librarian after missed meetings, she has some skin in this debate, so I'll be expecting to see her walk out the no door tonight. Members, the Oxford Union is not actually the best audience to extol the virtues of influencer culture in front of. I only say this because many of you in this chamber will doubtless have been influenced by the committee, by the hacks, past and present, to come down and vote on the Friday of 7th week every term. Freshers, you have so much to look forward to. But in all seriousness, don't take this lot as an example of what influencers are like. I promise you there are many out there in the big wide world who are far, far better. Before I begin my argument, I want to engage in rebuttal on just one of the points that Bronwyn said, and that was on the argument, the consumerism argument, that millennials can't, we can't afford things because we're caught up in these micro trends. We spend all our money, which we can't afford, on things that we're told to buy by influencers. And to me, this seems like the kind of argument that you say when you don't think someone should have nice things. It's the kind of argument that much older generations use to justify why millennials can't buy a house because they're buying too many skinny lattes. I don't think this argument that people are enjoying buying things, small things of low value, can really be a one which we're using to say everyone's poor because of influencers. I don't think that can stand. Anyway, to begin my argument proper, I'm here to make the case for influencers. And in my view, this shouldn't be difficult. The bar set by the motion is low for the side opposition. For you to walk through the no door, all that we must prove is that the aggregate impact of influencers has been a greater good than an evil. Side proposition will, and have, tried to argue the opposite of this by pointing to a few bad apples. We've already heard the name Andrew Tate been mentioned, and I'm sure somebody will probably remind us that Molly May said we all have the same 24 hours in the day. I'm sure they'll talk about Logan Paul and a couple of other bad apples throughout the debate, but these are the examples they're going to pick on because there aren't many. I'm sure I've already covered most of what they'll say. But as members of the union, you'll know how much people like controversy. And you'll also know that the actions of a few can all too often tarnish the good intentions and the good deeds of the many. My primary school maths teacher used to say that it takes 8 compliments to outweigh 1 piece of criticism. And that's why the proposition's argument, I'm sure, will have an emotive draw tonight. You know, they'll be telling you all these bad things that the influencers have done, and obviously you'll instinctually believe them, believe that all influencers are bad people. But it's also why, as rational voters, you have to resist being drawn into that false perception that all, most, or even a handful of influencers behave in anything other than an exemplary manner. Let's just take the vast majority of influencers as an example. They engage directly with their communities, be that through streaming on Twitch, hosting YouTube lives or Instagram lives, or doing Q&As. And they also care about their community. Many streamers, YouTubers, and other internet personalities are quick to call out hate speech from their peers or their fans. All this, coupled with their role as icons or entertainers, makes influencers, on the whole, invaluable to society. Think of your favorite influencer, Chunks was mentioned earlier, or Mr. Beast. I'm sure you'll find yourself agreeing with what I've just said. Before I proceed any further, Madam President, it is my duty and pleasure to introduce the speakers of the proposition. You've just heard from Bronwyn Price, the chair of the union's Access Committee and a third-year law student at St. Hugh's College. Since Bronwyn and I were running mates in our first ever union election, I could make the joke that her influence didn't result in her electoral success. But that would be unfair. Rather, I would like to draw your attention to Bronwyn's position as co-founder and treasurer of the Oxford West Country Society, a society so influential that the number of attendees at socials on occasion reached double digits. I remember a time when I would get spammed with invites to events like Pasties and Politics, Cider and Chitter, or Gert Lush Cheese Rolling. With names like this, no offense, it's no wonder people didn't show. The second speaker on Side Proposition is the award-winning journalist, author, and broadcaster, Sophia Smith-Gaylor. Apologies. As someone genuinely influential, it is a surprise to see you sitting on Side Proposition. But I would note that when I went online to try and find out more about you, I not only realized that you hadn't yet been able to reach the heady heights of fame required to have a Wikipedia page, but I also found that you enjoy using your influence to broadcast your peculiar dietary habits. Just to quote your Twitter post from earlier today, I ate bugs all night. Every meal you can see here has yum bug crickets in them. I hope your tummy's feeling all right. Oh, I'm sorry. Third, we've got our very own ex-returning officer, Joshua Platt, who studies law at St. Hilda's College and dodges tax in Jersey. Take a quick look at Josh's Instagram, and you'd think he's an influencer straight off Made in Chelsea. You've got the speedboats, you've got the jet skis, you've got the fancy watches. You name it. But my good sir, with 63 likes on some of your posts, I think you've got a little way to go yet. And finally, we'll hear from Lord Stephen Parkinson, a Conservative member of the Lords who is Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Arts and Heritage. I should warn you that Lord Parkinson was president not only of the Cambridge University Conservative Association, but also of the Cambridge Union. Make of that what you will. Madam President, these are your speakers, and they are most welcome. I've already argued that the virtues of the many should not be judged by the actions of the few. I now wish to present two more arguments as to why you should not regret the influence of influencers. The first is that influencers are better than any alternative, namely because most of them started out just like anyone else. Shows like Love Island bring stars from all walks of life and put them in the spotlight. I shan't deny that this can't have impacts on their mental health, but I would argue that from the perspective of an outsider, the incredible diversity this brings to the online space, the retail space, and the celebrity landscape is priceless. The secretary told me to take a look at the Victoria's Secret fashion show as an example of this. So if any of you are looking through my internet history, that's why it's there. But from 1995 to 2018, the show featured skinny, conventionally beautiful models. But if we look at the launch of the revamped World Tour this year, there's a far more diverse cast, a more diverse set of locations, a more diverse set of arts. They've got poetry, they have music than ever before. And I think a lot of that has to do with the effort of influencers to cancel the first Victoria's Secret fashion show iteration and bring about its second, diverse, better iteration, which we see now. To continue, let's take a look at the blurb of this debate, which bemoans that 75% of children would consider a career in online videos. How is this a bad thing? Before, to contemplate featuring on television, children had to know the right people, be born into the right families, live in the right areas. Influencer culture has given children, it's given people hope. They see people like them from their town, from their walks of life, their age, their race, online, and they're inspired to achieve what their role models have. Yes?
Isn't it based on a lie? Isn't it all constructed and artificial? We know this about reality television, we know this about influencers. It's all fake and artificial, so we're misleading people.
Thank you very much. So I think that all depends on what your definition of influencer is. I think it's been clear throughout that I've considered an influencer to be, broadly speaking, an online persona, an online personality, rather, of any sort. And I think to argue that the trends we see with people actually from diverse backgrounds, I'm not just talking about Love Island, I'm talking about who we follow on YouTube, who we follow on Twitch, people from actual diverse backgrounds, diverse races, etc., are actually being put in the spotlight by people wanting to watch what they're doing. You could argue, no thank you, you could argue, I'm sure, that Love Island is a setup. There's someone here actually you could ask. I'm sure she would say that it's not. But even if that were the case, the whole milieu of YouTube, of Twitch, of all these other online platforms, Instagram, Facebook, that we look at for our influences, which are designed by our perception, our culture, prove that this is not just a fake setup. If I may continue, we've got to contrast with influencers, those institutions that gave us and gave the older generations a sense of community before. These things like the council, the school, and the church. Were these diverse? Did these have the right people in positions of authority and influence, just so that you didn't only need to be rich, white, or middle-aged to succeed? No. Does influencer culture have this? Undoubtedly, yes. And don't let the arguments that increased media production and media engagement leads to reduced productivity fool you. Influencers serve a crucial role in the democratization of jobs, careers, and even consumer behavior. No longer will someone think that a role is not for them, they shouldn't live a certain way or buy a certain thing, if their role models have trodden that ground before. This is good for people's self-esteem, and it's good for the economy. Now, more than ever, we are seeing influencers being offered share options for helping companies to advertise their products, which is evidence in itself of their economic importance. If that wasn't all, influencers also help to guide consumerism in an ethical manner. The vast majority work with brands which they themselves approve of, and under UK law, they must disclose when their content is sponsored, which gives fans the ability to judge the products for themselves. So far in this speech, I've considered influencers qua influencers. That is to say, I've ignored those people who have influence as an extrinsic product of their jobs or their professions. But surely sportsmen and women, artists, musicians, even politicians could be considered under a broad brush to be influencers. Let us think in the past of people like the prophet. I was talking to Josh about this at dinner. The prophet, the king, the general, the priest. Were these people whose roles didn't confer influence on them by the very nature of their jobs? Are we to say that people shouldn't have influence because influence is in itself a negative? On the one hand, I've already argued that influencers are no bad thing, but if we consider that one could be considered an influencer simply on account of their profession, which brings something else to society, surely then we cannot, under any circumstances, say that influence is a bad thing. In short, members, influencers are dedicated, diverse, and fulfill crucial functions in our society. They are actors, singers, musicians, and personalities, and they bring much to our everyday lives. To say yes to influencers is to say yes to the hope of those 75% of children. Not just that they can be influencers, but that they can go into whatever walk of life they wish. I urge you to vote side opposition. Thank you very much.